And here we are.
Wubba lubba dub dub.
There we go. We'll have to wait for Weenus's entrance to have the there's a sound effect that we've heard every time now. Um, Welcome everybody to a giant topic. As you can see from the title card there, China from 1271 to present. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. Probably because I'm insane. Um, Especially all to do in one night. It just it's bananas. But I'm going to do my best, and I hope that I don't put everyone to sleep. Hope it's entertaining, educational, and all of everything in between. So I'm going to turn this on. And for new people in the chat, I don't. I've had slides once because I had a prepared lecture for a class, but generally speaking, I just go off of Wikipedia tabs. It's just way easier for me to generate. This is not supposed to be the most firm, professional of lectures. This is a casual space, so feel free to ask any kind of question you want, even if you think it's stupid. It's one, it's not stupid, and two, this is this is an open space. Ask away. Um, so we're doing China. This is just the modern Wikipedia page for the People's Republic of China, one of two Chinas that exist today, and we will get into aspects of that. The reason I brought up this is the first thing that I want to look at is I just wanted to give you a an idea of take a look at the outline of what is considered China because that changes depending on the century that you're in. And I think that was kind of it for this page, just to kind of yeah, just get an idea of the size and shape of what is considered China. And then of course I've got a Google map here to give you an idea. I think staring at maps for hours at a time is a perfectly normal thing to do, but I understand that for some folks that's an uncommon activity. So just to give you an idea of where China is in the world, um, so it's somewhat central in East Asia, surrounded by all kinds of countries. We have Southeast Asia here with Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, that sort of thing. They share a border with India in the Himalayas. Um, of course, Pakistan as well. Um, have borders with Kazakhstan, Russia, North Korea, and Mongolia. And then, of course, proximity to the island of Taiwan, which in modern day we refer to as the Republic of Korea. And I'll get into that in a few hours, as well as relative proximity to, sorry, did I say Republic of Korea? Republic of China. Um, and then we have the two Koreas here and Japan off coast. Yeah, just another kind of really basic building block here. The name China. Where does it come from, and why do we call China China? Because the name for China in Chinese is not China. I'm also going to mispronounce every single word that I try and say in Chinese. So we'll just get this out of the way. Zhongguo. Again, it's going to be mispronounced. You don't have to tell me in the comments. Um, oh, sorry, there is a comment there. 755 years. Yes, that is it's a lot of time. Um, so Zhongguo generally gets translated as Middle Kingdom, and as we can see from the map, that's somewhat of a pretty on the nose name. It's the kingdom in the middle of everything. There's Venus. Uh, so it's the kingdom in the middle of everywhere, and that's why it's got that name. The name of China um, also comes from a name in China, or at least as best as we can understand it. It's um, a little sorry, it's a little cryptic as to exactly where the origins of the word China come from, but as near as most people can tell, it comes from the first dynasty that that controlled a kind of a unified China. Um, I think I remember that a Q is supposed to be pronounced sh, so that's Shin. Um, I used to say kin but I think it's Shin. Um, and so this is the very first dynasty in China, and as the name Shin got transferred west into various languages, it kind of got tossed around and mutated, and became both China as well as Sina. Sina is Latin for China, and so we in modern day English refer to China as China. But when we're talking about things that China does, so like a war involving China, we tend to say Sino. So the Sino-Soviet War, or if you've ever seen Sinoization, or just Sino anything. Um, both of these words mean China, and both very likely came from the name for the first dynasty in China, the Shin, or this has a Z there, Zin dynasty. So ultimately, however I pronounce it. Um, and so I've already started talking about dynasties. China has its own domestic historians, its own domestic traditions of history, and rules of how history is organized, and what makes good history, what makes bad history. Um, and historically, or traditionally, they have organized Chinese history into an arrangement of dynasties. And so, what you will see if you want to read more is you can very easily go from one dynasty to the next. It's a seamless transition, and they always show this kind of big map of a unified China, and that's what the historiography, the style of history, is intended to display, is that China goes from solid one China to solid one China. As you can imagine, that is a little more clean than how history tends to happen. And I mean, it's true. It's a very simplified state of things. And it also emphasizes the idea that China as a unified thing is somehow the natural state of China. Um, this is this is no more the natural state of China as it would be to be disunified or split up into 100 little kingdoms. It's just that Chinese history does seem to be quite concerned with ensuring they refer to things as kind of a unified, solid state. I remember, this is just an anecdote, but I went to school once with a girl from Taiwan, and we just were having some random conversations, and she just threw out the fact of China is a nice unified country. And I thought this was odd from somebody coming from Taiwan, but whatever. She was adamant China is a unified country, and the West, and by the West she meant Europe, has never had something like that, a nice, strong, unified government. And I seemed to blow her mind by mentioning that the Roman Empire was a thing that existed, and it was a unification of pretty much all of what would be considered a country in Europe. And she did was adamant, like, whatever that is, it's different. It's nowhere near as strong as China. And like, okay, sure, whatever. That was a random conversation with somebody I had 25 years ago. But anyway, so Chinese history divided up into dynasties, and there is a particular principle that is emphasized with these dynasties called the Mandate of Heaven. In English, anyway, we call it the Mandate of Heaven. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Chinese. Um, and the idea with this is, if everything is going great, then obviously you've got the mandate of heaven. You are the chosen dynasty, the chosen people, the chosen government to run the Middle Kingdom. But if there's disease, if there is um, uh, revolts, if there's foreign invasion, and any number of things that cause problems, obviously you've lost the mandate of heaven, and that it's okay for someone else to claim it and kick you out as a way of removing one dynasty and putting in a new one. And this is um, part of Chinese political history for thousands of years, really up until the 20th century. And it was done away with when the final emperors were deposed. But that being said, even though officially the modern Communist Party does not have the mandate of heaven, and they do not promote the mandate of heaven, um, they have like the secular mandate of heaven. Like the same bargain seems to exist with the Chinese people, as long as everyone lives are improving, and generally speaking, things aren't going to pot. I guess you can be in power, despite how abusive or authoritarian your government may be. So we will see this mandate of heaven as an important political tool changing hands throughout the centuries. And I have a clip here from a movie called Hero. Um, this this is just my camera. It's not a video feed, but the movie is subtitled. So unfortunately, what you're going to get is you'll just get the subtitles. You won't get the actual Chinese dialogue or any of the sound effects. But I strongly encourage anyone who has not seen Hero. It's from 2002. Highly, highly recommended. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. It is also a bit of Chinese propaganda, but it's such a gorgeous movie. It's a wuxia, kind of a martial arts on wires, and Jet Li is the main star. He's playing Nameless, and he is a character who is in the very beginning of the first dynasty in China, and he is intending to murder the first so-called emperor of China, the first self-proclaimed emperor of China, because of all the death and destruction he has caused. So I'm just gonna hit play here.
参见，给你写了哪2个字？
天下。
天下。
参见说，七国连年混战，百姓受苦，唯有大王才能停止战乱，一统天下。参见希望我为了天下，放弃刺杀大王。他跟我说，一个人的痛苦与天下人比，便不再是痛苦。赵国与秦国的仇恨，放到天下，也不再是仇恨。
没想到最了解寡人的，竟是寡人通缉的刺客。寡人孤独一人，忍受多少责难，多少暗算，无人能懂寡人之心。就连秦国的满朝文武，也视寡人为暴君。想不到残剑，与寡人素昧平生，才真正懂得寡人，与寡人心意相通。寡人想知道，你手无寸铁，如何刺我？
夺剑。
此剑随寡人征战南北也有10年了，寡人 能有残剑大侠这样的知己，便是死。
Almost, baby. Almost time.
你就为天下
It's almost time.
决定这一剑吧。
I was going to let that play out, but I just realized it's the pinnacle of the movie, and I don't want to necessarily spoil it for everyone, even though I probably already have. But so that's a sequence talking about the origins of the all under heaven, or the mandate of heaven, in Chinese political theory, and that is the first emperor of Xin, who was a tyrant and a horrible guy and an absolutely oppressive authoritarian,
Oh,
but
okay. Okay. Okay.
I believe Weenus is being
Okay.
visited by a puppy.
Weenus, you're unmuted.
It's all good.
But yeah, so he was a tyrant and a horrible authoritarian. But in Chinese history, they just have this developed idea of mandate of heaven, that your atrocities are somewhat forgiven as long as you're attempting to make it better for the whole. And yeah, again, highly recommend everyone watch Hero. Fantastic, gorgeous movie. Again, a little bit of a propaganda film.
I just realized I have actually seen that.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters when it was on international distribution. I think we didn't get it in theaters until 2004. I can't remember now. Yes, the color, Spud, pretty colors. It's the color gradations throughout the movie are part of the filmmaking, and it gives you an idea of whose perspective you're getting based on how all of the colors change in the scene. So these last little tabs here, somewhat of an apology. Basically, I'm going to be engaging in a whole lot of what's known as great man history or great man theory. And the idea here is I'm going to give you a lot of people. I'm all fuzzy. What's going on here? I'm going to be giving you a whole lot of people's names, a whole lot of, not necessarily dates. I'm going to try and cut down on the dates, but definitely it's just going to be excuse me for 1 second. No, now I'm frozen. That's great. It's so Great Man History. It's going to focus on a lot of big movers and shakers. And normally, as my background is in archaeology, we can't focus on, and we tend not to like to focus on specific individuals as if they are the be all end all of all things. But when simplifying history to the extent that I am, and when kind of going over as much history as I'm going over in the short amount of time, it's an unfortunate just reality that I'm going to end up talking an awful lot about great man history. And the alternative to that is, of course, or an alternative to that is social history. This is where you emphasize movements, you emphasize people groups, you emphasize culture, society in general, rather than specific individuals. And no worries, Venus. Everything it's all good. And I won't have enough. I won't have a lot of space for that in this talk. But a little bit of tiny little bit of social history. The last two tabs here for this just opener is to give you an idea of the ethnic diversity of China and the linguistic diversity of China. We often just talk about China as being home of the Chinese, And there is an ethnic group that is, I guess we would say, generic Chinese, and they are known as Han Chinese. And the Han Chinese are the actual that ethnic name comes from the second dynasty, the second imperial dynasty, the Han dynasty. Effectively, the areas that the Han dynasty ruled over, it's like, okay, everyone who is under that is kind of, they're the Han Chinese. But there's also there's a dozen various different Chinese peoples, and they have slightly different languages. They all learn to this today. They all learn standard Mandarin, but in the north, in the south, and in the west, and in the east, along coastal areas, just countless numbers of different Chinese peoples. And I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that there is variety, even in an area that on a lot of maps would just be labeled as like plastered over as Han Chinese. But more to the point, we also have outside of China proper, or I guess kind of traditional Chinese lands, we have other different ethnic groups like Mongols, Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Manchu, and we will talk about a lot of these peoples as we go through. And then that goes also for languages. I'm not able to go into a whole lot on language, something I like to do a lot of, but Mandarin is the spoken version of standard Chinese. But there are alternate versions of Cantonese and so on, where the spoken version is different, but the written version is predominantly the same. And so written Chinese is quite conservative, and it's been held the same for quite some time. And but the spoken versions, they're not mutually intelligible. So someone who speaks standard Mandarin and someone who speaks Cantonese can't automatically understand each other. They have some vocabulary in common, but not massive amounts. So I just wanted to give an impression of the variety that exists out there. And I'm going to turn that off for a second and try to get my camera rolling. While I'm trying to get my camera up and running again, do we have any questions on that first little section?
Not me.
Don't all speak at once.
Did you hear me? Did you
I
hear me
did.
say not me?
I did hear you say no.
I'm participating. Teach.
Fair enough.
Sounds like we're all failing.
No one's failing anything.
Hey,
The
question.
rest of
And
us
I
just quack
may have
politely.
I may have missed this when you started. Do the Chinese refer to their country differently, like other countries do? Like how we call it Germany, but the Germans don't call it that.
Yeah, it's one of the first tabs that I went over. So there's a term for it. Names of China. How did I mispronounce that? Zhongguo.
Okay, so that's the term. Okay,
Yeah,
got it. I
yeah.
did hear that. I just didn't. I missed the context of it. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the term, and it translates as Middle Kingdom, or like Middle State, Central State, kind of the place that's in the middle. And if you kind of look at a map, China's kind of in the middle of a whole lot of things. And as long as you are a strong, powerful state, that's a good thing, because you're close to everybody else, and you can kind of reach out and touch anybody you like. But if your borders are failing and your internal structures are weakened and everything seems to be going to pot, it can lead to catastrophe pretty quickly. Okay, so if there's no further questions on the opening salvo, I'm going to dive in. Just checking notes here, just in case anybody's posted anything. Okay. Right. I'm not starting from the very beginning. I panicked for a second, thinking that's not the Qin Dynasty or Qin Dynasty. But I'm not starting from the beginning of time. Thank God. So I said it's starting at 1271, but of course I can't just start there because we got to know where we came from to know how we got there. But this is basically just before, and this is a my brain is turned to mush for a second. These are the unification of the people. They're called the Jurchens. And it's a little complicated, but Jurchen, they eventually start calling themselves the Manchu, but it's the same people group. And so the Jurchens are in northern China, or what was considered in today would be considered northern China. And the Jurchen tribes merged together. They kind of like conquered each other and grouped together to form a polity that they called Great Jin, or the Jin Dynasty. And this was a state that was vying for control of China with the Song Dynasty. We have the Song Dynasty here, and as I said, they always show it in maps as the biggest version of itself. So, pardon me. When this was happening, when the Jin Dynasty was forming, the Song Dynasty was actually being pushed to the south, and they were the southern Song. They were not in control of all of China. So you have two dynasties claiming to be essentially having the mandate of heaven. And into this conflict, you get the Mongols. The Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan. First thing they do is, of course, unify the Mongol tribes through conquest and mergers and so on and so forth. But they also conquer the Jin Dynasty, and this is not an overnight success. This takes quite some time. It was started by Genghis Khan, but it had to be completed by his children and grandchildren. I guess just his children. But anyway, but something that is of interest to me that I wanted to bring this up is, as the Mongols were conquering the Jin Dynasty, the southern Song were aiding the Mongols. They were, our enemies are the Jin, and we're all of China. They're not all of China, and these are just Mongols. They're from up north. So the Song Dynasty was aiding the Mongols to kill off the Jin, in the assumption that the Mongols would just go home. And then the Mongols conquered the Song. And so this was started under Ogadai Khan, who was Genghis Khan's kid, and then was finished under Kublai Khan, which was his grandchild, Genghis Khan's grandchild. And Kublai Khan is the last person who claimed to be in full control of the entirety of the Mongol Empire, which at this point in time was stretching from all of China to, like modern day Ukraine and parts of Turkey and the Middle East. So it's huge overland empire. But Kublai Khan finishes the conquest of the Song, but again, it's not an overnight success. It takes 40 years. And again, this is something that if you just look up, so I'll show you the tab in a moment here, Yuan Dynasty, that's the name of the dynasty the Mongols found. It shows a seamless transition from Song to Yuan, and that's it. The numbers line up and everything. So this was not a an overnight process, and war is ruinous on local populations. So people tend to be very happy when it's over, and so that's why you get people who will accept foreign domination or pretty authoritarian domination, even though they don't want that, just because it ends the war or wars. In the process of trying to conquer the Song dynasty, there is a Mongol civil war, and Kublai has to dispatch his younger brother. And the reason I bring up this civil war is, even though technically at the end of it Kublai is the great Khan, he's the Khan of everybody. The power of the like basically everything in the Mongol Empire is split up, and so you've got 4 kind of Mongol empires running its own stuff locally, but they technically all pay tribute to Kublai Khan as the great Khan back in back home, so to speak. But really, after the end of this civil war, Kublai Khan is less the great Khan of the Mongol Empire and more just the emperor, the Chinese emperor. Which it's not a bad gig to have if you. It's not terrible work if you can get it. And so this is our first kind of character in our great man history is Kublai Khan. So he is the founder of the Yuan dynasty, and as you can see here, it'll show it all in its vast glory when it's at its furthest extent. And he is, I mean, I don't know if we could say the most influential person in Chinese history, but he's going to be right up there. He's one of the most influential people in Chinese history. For one thing, he founds what at the time was called, come on, where's the name of it? Oh, Khan Balik, which is the city of the Khan, which is modern day Beijing. So he founds the modern day capital of China. It started out as a northern capital. There are multiple capitals kind of throughout China, but eventually it becomes the general capital of China proper. He tries. So I mentioned all those different languages and different people groups. He actually tries to implement a new script. And the idea here is we're going to abandon the way that the Chinese write. We're going to abandon the way that the Tibetans write. We're going to abandon the way that all of these different ethnic and cultural groups write their own language. And we're all going to adopt this one script, even though everyone's language is going to be different, to facilitate reading and promoting connectedness throughout the empire. It didn't work. It didn't last beyond really his reign, but it was an effort. Any questions on kind of what I've talked about here so far? No. Okay. Sorry, I just thought I heard someone maybe trying to speak up.
Why didn't it work? Did it just like no one adopted it, or it just suck?
So the
Like
writing
the general.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
No, you're good.
Oh, so writing in this time period is very much an elite activity. Your average person on the street is not literate and does not read and write. And so you have elite schools set up for people to learn reading and writing, and they have traditions, and they go back centuries. There's you're part of a literary tradition, and it's very difficult to kind of steer the boat of literary tradition in a short time period, especially when you've got a dynasty that, like, it's not like the script was specifically made for writing, say, in Chinese. It's an adaptation of the Tibetan script, and I went down a deep rabbit hole of trying to find out where that script came from. basically they claimed it actually came from um, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and I'm like, no. But anyway, regardless, that's what it says here. If you look at parent script Egyptian, it says it right there. But that's a thousands of years transmission. So let's just not even go there for a second. It's an adapted script, and so just because the king says so is kind of the reason, and sometimes that's just not good enough. If you've got a tradition of writing, you've got a history of writing, a kind of a cultural comfort with writing in another script. And apparently, even amongst Mongol elites, because there was a Mongol script too, they didn't even really like this new script. So it seemed to be very much the pet project of the emperor, and most people resisted it, and they dropped it after he died. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because like I'm just thinking about it, like it sounds like a good idea for a country. Everyone writes the same way if you're speaking multiple dialects, but
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind they are actually. It's also for different languages. So even if you could read the sounds, like you knew what sounds they would make, you wouldn't necessarily be able to read the script because, if it's written in Chinese and you only speak Mongol, you can like make the sounds of the words, but you won't actually know what it says because you don't speak Chinese.
change.
It's the same reason like you can read something written in Czech, but unless you actually speak Czech, you're gonna have no idea what any of it means, even though the Latin characters are still Latin, like they are in English. Or I guess I could have picked any other French, German.
Yeah, you picked a language that I wasn't sure I could read. Like,
Yeah, I don't know why, because the Czech game was today. Okay, that's why I thought of Czech.
until you said I could read it, I thought it was in Cyrillic, like Russian and those other languages I can't read. But
Yeah, no, it's using Latin script or an adapted Latin script. But that's my fault for paying attention to the hockey game.
I can read Canadian.
Yeah, well, can you?
I was gonna say you're Canadian. Isn't it illegal to not pay attention to the hockey game?
Hey.
Yeah, it's true. I almost missed it. I only realized it was on when I found out we were down 2-1. And then
Were you disappointed when you heard about the curling?
Remind me who we
We
is.
we were lucky enough at my school that we barely had no students because of the snowstorm, so people were just watching the hockey game in class.
we is in the Canadians were up against Czech Republic or Czechia, and the Czechs were up 2-1 against us.
Yeah.
Anything to take eyes off of Canadian curling teams.
I'm not
get him. Get him.
Oh, I was wondering when somebody was going to make that joke.
Get him.
I'm not going to comment. I do not know enough about curling other than I think we are being framed. That's
yeah, someone else is touching the stones when you're not supposed to.
Is it really being framed if the whole thing happened because apparently Canada is like known to do this?
For doing this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why they put the cameras in the first place, specifically for Canada. Like, okay, anyway, back to the topic at hand.
Yeah.
You're upsetting him, people.
God
No,
damn
it's
it,
just,
Linus.
it's fine. It's fine.
I'm just kidding. Anyway,
Everything's fine.
back to
It's just
China.
a dumpster fire.
I
Of
actually can't believe that you guys did that.
Of all the things, was it John Green quote? Of all the unimportant things, sports are most important. Okay, back on task. Also, happening during Kublai Khan's reign is the visit of Marco Polo. You may have heard of this guy before. He's from Venice, and he traveled overland to China and visited the court of Kublai Khan, and then he went there and back again, and he wrote a big red book.
I mean, I've heard of him, but I can never find him in the pool.
I thought that was the little short guy who wrote that book.
Well, he's Italian. He's pretty short.
Okay, fair enough.
But yes, I was making a Hobbit / Lord of the Rings reference.
But there's also there was a TV show that was canceled about this guy.
Yeah, there was a like a early Netflix show, I think.
Yeah, it was
about-
a Netflix show.
Yeah, I didn't realize
I
it was
enjoyed it, but it got canceled.
I mean, I think that was Netflix's thing, right? They let a show get to 2 seasons and then cancel them because it was easier to bring in more people with new shows than to keep an old show running. But
It was putting too much pressure and attention on big silkworm industry. They were upset that everyone was giving it so much attention.
Oh, okay. So the one of China's major exports throughout history has been silk, and it is like disgusting process to make silk because you do have to take the silkworms. They like make silk out of I mean, it's not out of their butt, but like out of their butt, and you take the
tell
strands.
you how it's done.
Yeah, I'm good. But the fact of the matter is,
Honestly, the way that they used to do it is they would let the silkworms hatch and then they would take those cocoons, and those cocoons are the silk. Nowadays, and as time grew on, they were like, oh, well, we don't want to wait that long. So they would boil them, which would kill the larvae on the inside, and then chop the tops off and empty them and then take the silk.
there you go. But you need silkworms.
It's rude.
And you need lots of them. And it was a carefully guarded secret in China. But during the Middle Ages, actually several centuries before Marco Polo, some I guess spies, but like merchants from the Byzantine Empire were able to get a bunch of silkworms out, and so they were able to start manufacturing silk in the Mediterranean, and profit from the trade in that. But I mean, China was still a source of silk as well as a bunch of other goods, and that's what Marco Polo was there for, is to find goods to trade and markets to use. And yeah, the overland route didn't get used as much after Marco Polo because, of course, it's treacherous, takes forever. But finding a sea route to China became an obsession for certain European powers in the following centuries. Okay, so the Yuan dynasty, takes control of all of China. Really, by when does the Southern Song end? By 1234. So, oh, that's the Jin dynasty. I'm foolish. 1280. There we go. Oh, it actually does say 1280 or 1271. Huh. Oh, it's, I guess, 8 years difference. I'm confusing myself now. Anyway, what I'm getting at is you can see this number here, 1368. The Yuan dynasty, the Mongol dynasty, does not actually stick around for a very long time. Kublai is the first, and I think it's his grandson that is ousted. But they fall prey to rebellions. And so if you have a prolonged period of rebellion, you can expect essentially to lose the mandate of heaven. And so there was a series of regional groups that rose up in rebellion for a variety of reasons. And one of those groups went on to become the Ming dynasty. So they were able to oust the Yuan dynasty and take control of the majority of China, and then became themselves Great Ming, or the Ming dynasty. However, because nothing is ever super easy, the Yuan dynasty does continue. They just move up north and essentially control only Mongol lands, and they drop an awful lot of their Chinese trappings. So Yuan emperors had started, they dressed like Chinese. Like, I mean, you see Kublai here. I guess he's kind of half and half here dressed, but in other portraiture and so on, he's dressed as a Chinese ruler, and his kids are dressed as Chinese rulers. But they kind of return to a more nomadic and Mongol style of rulership. So that is kind of just the first little tidbit. This is kind of the beginning of the Middle Ages section of tonight's escapades. Does anybody have any questions on what I've covered so far? Specifically, think of also that I mentioned that this is the Middle Ages portion. For those that voted for the Middle Ages, is there anything that you wanted to know about medieval China that you haven't necessarily heard and maybe want to hear about? Don't all speak
Nope.
at once.
When
Well,
will
I don't
you
know
make a
technology
man out
different?
of me?
Oh wow.
Oh my gosh, I don't really know anything about medieval China. That's what I thought was kind of interesting.
How is the technology different between medieval China and like what I consider medieval times, probably Europe? Is it similar? Do they shoot guns, fireworks at each other? And I don't mean that to sound racist.
Well, so they don't
but
have firearms.
can't tell.
They don't have firearms yet in Europe. Firearms are they become a feature. When do Actually, I should have looked that up.
Because I know they use them in wartime and
Okay,
not
so fireworks
guns,
are
but
actually
rockets and fireworks and stuff.
Because like,
Is it
didn't
approximately
gunpowder?
the same dates or is it vastly different dates?
Oh, in terms of so in terms of medieval dates, we actually use the medieval period in Europe because that's where the term comes from. Is we looked at European activity and there was a kind of middle period that they identified between the classical period and what's called the Enlightenment, and so those dates, roughly talking 500 to 1500, were declared to be the Middle Ages or the medieval period. And then whenever we encounter cultures, and by we I mean people in the European education tradition, which covers North America as well, encounter cultures around the world, we look at say, oh, look, between roughly the same dates, these people had something that's kind of similar to what Europe had, and so we'll call it the Indian medieval period, or medieval India or medieval China or something along those lines. And so yes, the dates sort of kind of line up, but that's kind of by design because that's the comparison that is being used. Instead of looking at the area and going, this is exactly like Europe was in the Middle Ages, so we're going to call this the Chinese Middle Ages. We say, while Europe was in its Middle Ages, this is what China was doing, so it's more or less the Chinese Middle Ages. In terms of organization, culture, technology, they're pretty different. So the Middle Ages is characterized by a system of government called feudalism, which if you ask 5, 10, 100 historians, you'll get 5, 10, 100 different versions of what it means. But the long and the short of it is it's a pyramid scheme where you owe fealty to someone above you, and eventually that person above you is a king or god or both. And you pay for things in the way that you owe. So, you might pay in money, but you're more than likely going to be paying taxes in kind from crops that you've grown yourself, or crops that your people have grown that you've taxed them on, and you just kind of bring it up the pyramid. And this organization, this kind of hierarchical organization, that money is somewhat secondary and it's largely trades in kind and so on, is broadly defined as feudalism. That system doesn't really exist in China because money never collapsed. They pay for things in cash, and the money economy never disappeared. like it did in Europe. That's why Europe engaged in this kind of process. India does fit a little bit better into the way that things functioned in Europe. They still use money. Money never collapsed there, but there was the hierarchical organization of things fit a little bit better with a bunch of little statelets as to what Europe was doing at the same time. Whereas China always again trends towards one big state, one even if it's two big states or three big states, they're all claiming to be representative of the whole. And if it's broken up into a bunch of little states, every one of them is basically saying, I'm going to be the big one, and they're all vying for control over who gets to control all of China, rather than saying, I'm happy with my little bit, and we're just going to continue on as this little bit, like you would have with an Indian state or a European state. Does that make sense, or did I just confuse things further?
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Jeff has a question here. Did Lunar New Year come into this and become Chinese New Year? To be honest, I don't know anything about the Chinese calendar. I can quickly.
The year of the horse, fire horse.
Yeah. I do suspect that it goes back quite a ways. Yeah, so there's lunar solar calendars for each dynasty, it looks like. So this goes back. The Zhao dynasty is mytho history. That's like, yeah, way back. So I'm going to assume that there has been a version of a Chinese calendar for each, and they split it up by dynasty. So I assume it somewhat adapts or changes with each dynasty. But beyond that, I'm sorry, I don't actually know. Why is it called the Middle Ages? Middle of what? Oh, Band-Aid. It's generally considered to be in the middle between classical antiquity, so ancient Rome and ancient Greece. That's kind of the before times, and then what was to them modernity, but the era of the Enlightenment. So the 18th century, 17th century, and then they would call modern historians also refer to this time period as the early modern history. So essentially, it's the middle time between then, ancient history, and now. And that's just that part in the middle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Okay. So, we've seen the birth of the Ming Dynasty and the rump state of Northern Yuan. So, what can we say about Ming China? Ming China is one of the big ones. It's a time period that a lot of people have heard about. They may not have any idea when it was, but they're like, yeah, the Ming Dynasty. I've heard of that. That's a thing in history. It's generally considered one of the kind of golden ages in Chinese history, a sliver of time that was the Ming Dynasty, because it's never the whole time, because they come in when things are bad, and generally they leave when things are bad. That's how they leave. So it's somewhere in the middle. Ming Vase, exactly. Arcane. Ceramics, porcelain are highly prized from Ming era China. And so I'm going to do a little bit of Great Man history here. So first, we've got the Hongwu Emperor. He's the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty. And so he is one of he's one of these kind of warlords that sprung out of the revolts against the Yuan dynasty. And he co-opted, it says here, he co-opts one of the guys who claims Song heritage, so Song dynasty heritage. And so there's a little bit of pretend where, oh yeah, no, we're just the same guys from before. Don't worry about it. Ignore those Mongols who are gone now, and recognize us. I wanted to mention him specifically. Why did I want to mention him specifically? Da-da-da-da-da. I mean, he's the one who stages all the conquests. I think under him, basically, almost all of China proper is conquered. But again, that northern Jin, the Mongol territory, is not. Yeah, I think that's about it. I didn't have a huge amount on him. He's just the founding emperor. The second emperor in the Ming Dynasty is only around for a few years. Thank you. Looks like Relica has put in how silk is made in the chat for the text session here, or for the Q&A session. Sorry, where was I? Oh, I know what it was. Yes, there we go. I wanted to talk about the first emperor because one of the things that he did is he put in a whole bunch of reforms to limit the power of court eunuchs and people who he considered outside of his family compact, and essentially saying he wanted his own people in charge and he didn't want anybody from outside taking control. And then as soon as he died, his son reverses all of them, all of these reforms, and essentially reverts back to court eunuchs are in charge and powerful within high Chinese society, and the bureaucracy kind of is an agent unto itself. It's kind of an entity and a power. There's a theory that part of the reason why the Chinese state always comes back, even though China gets conquered over and over again or splits apart, is that the Chinese bureaucracy is so powerful that it's basically it provides leaders with free money. That why not just let them do what they do? So kind of let the bureaucrats run things. I get money. I don't actually have to do anything. I have to pay attention. My coffers get filled. So I wouldn't call that a particularly academic theory, but it is a theory that's out there, and I think it has at least a little bit of merit. But the second Ming emperor is not around for very long. His main kind of contribution is reversing all of his father's changes. He has a bit of a civil war, and his uncle wins the civil war, deposes his nephew. Actually, his nephew dies, and his uncle becomes the Yongle Emperor. And the Yongle Emperor is again one of these incredibly influential people in Chinese history. He makes changes everywhere that changes can be made. And one of the things that he does is he actually sends out essentially a diplomatic corps to the world, to every country that can exist out there that his people can get to let them know that China exists. China is the premier power in the world, and if they would like, they can have relationships with China, but it's going to be a relationship in which you pay China tribute. That's it's a massive expression of power. These were one of the major expressions of these were the Ming treasure voyages, and they were captained by Zheng He. And I wanted to bring Zheng He up because one, he is an ethnic Chinese Muslim eunuch who was a powerful admiral and diplomat for the Yongle Emperor, and I thought that's a pretty interesting identity. So he is the admiral in charge of these treasure fleets as they sail around the world. And I think there's a map actually in the next Tau. Here we go. So this is the 7th voyage, so it doesn't account for the previous ones. You can just see here where the fleet takes off from China, sails around here, and then into, I think that's probably Vietnam, down into, is that Indonesia today? And then into India. They go to Iran. They go to Arabia, East Africa, and that's just one of these 7 voyages. So they go quite a distance, and they trade in just lavish goods. They're being very generous in gifting things, but they're also doing so under the understanding that if you wanted to trade with the Ming Empire, you would also be bringing gifts of your own as tribute to Ming. Another reason why I wanted to bring up these voyages is a book that was written quite some time ago now. It's somewhat fallen by the wayside, thankfully, called 1421, the year China discovered the world. And it was written by a journalist named Gavin Menzies, I think. And he claimed that China did more than visit the world. This is actually a better map here showing multiple locations of the different trips. But Menzies claimed that China actually visited the whole world, like the New World, the Old World, Europe, everything. It is a case of pseudo history. It's a book of pseudo history, but it was popular when the book came out. I think, when did this? Oh, it looks like the author passed. Yeah. 1421, 2002. So it was popular 24 years ago. I'm a little out of date. Apologies. I know that I've had people come up to me and ask about this in the past. I have been gifted a copy of the book and I have read it because they want to know, how accurate is this? And frankly, it's just not accurate at all. These treasure fleets did exist, and they went to the known world, but they didn't go to parts of the world that the Ming didn't even know about. And especially the kind, if you look at these pathways, these are not open ocean going vessels. They stick near land because Chinese ships are unable to handle kind of open blue water ocean. But just in case anybody had heard of this book or heard about this theory that China had actually gone out into the world and seen things, I wanted to bring this up to try and address it. Does anybody have any questions so far on anything that I've been covering here? No. Okay.
Nope.
Not currently. No.
Yeah. No, that's
good.
fine. Yeah. Okay. Good. Just making sure. So the Yongle Emperor, he's going out in all different directions with his treasure fleets. He's also building. So the Great Wall of China technically existed from, I think, the earliest dynasties, but it was largely mud or turf. The massive stoneworks that you see, these are from the Yongle Emperor. These are from the Ming Dynasty. And wouldn't you know it, a dynasty that comes to power after kicking out the Mongols might want to put up some defenses in case the Mongols come back. So that is a bit of, I think that makes sense to me, why they might have refortified the northern frontier. And so, yeah, it's very energetic ruler, the Yongle Emperor. He also founds a new capital. So basically, he's the one who relocates things to Beijing because the old capital burned down when he was staging a little bit of a civil war. And so I think this is when the capital becomes permanently Beijing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He also builds the Forbidden City. So the massive temple complex and palace complex that's in the heart of Beijing. That's the Yongle Emperor. You can get an idea of what that looks like here in modern day Beijing. And he goes on a bunch of military campaigns. So he doesn't just let the Mongols retreat and stay there. He's actively trying to engage them in conflict to test them out and make sure that they are sufficiently weakened that they won't form a threat. As we move through his, I think this is his son. Yeah, eldest son of the Yongle Emperor. I wanted to highlight him. Oh, because he only rules for, he reigns for a year. And then he dies of a heart attack. So he's in for just a year, and he's in just long enough to stop the treasure fleets and essentially end all external trade. So his father had gone through on these horrendously expensive treasure fleets, built a massive navy to, go out and meet the world. And the son, the new emperor, is in just long enough to go, no, we'll have none of that. Let's be insular again. Shut down the navy. Ugh. And then he dies. So, people who are in for a short period of time can have longer lasting impacts than you might think. But then his son. Wait, no, we jump here. Yeah, we jump from the fourth. I skipped a lot of the Middle Ming because it's, not exciting enough, I guess. I mean, they're just kind of going about. I am giving a broad history. It's not. You could spend 3 hours just on each individual emperor and probably their choice of silk. But I just don't have the time for that, unfortunately. But I jumped ahead to this emperor here, the 10th emperor in the Ming Dynasty. He lives in the end of the 15th century, so 1470 to 1505. And the reason I brought him forward, the reason I wanted to talk about him, why was it again? Hold on. Yeah, culture. Tea trade. Is that it? Tea for horses. No, that's not it. What is it? I chose this for a reason. I just can't remember what it was. Oh well. Defenses. Darn. No, looks like I don't have a good reason for why, or at least I haven't been able to find one. Oh, maybe it was just his promulgation of the Great Ming Code, but that's... Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Basically, after the guy who died after a year, things are very, very stable, relatively speaking. But also, things are very, very insular. And so China does not engage with the world. China just sort of keeps to China's own business and their immediate surroundings. And life is good. They're making money. They're existing. So there's not a whole lot of impetus to really go out and see a lot of the world. And at this point in time, the European powers are exploring. So it was around this point in time. Well, actually, I'm going to get to that right here. So this is after his life. So maybe I meant to put his son. The 11th one. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. The Portuguese show up in the beginning beginning of the 1600 or 1500s, the 16th century. The Portuguese show up in China, and they're wanting to trade, but they're not really willing to take no for an answer, and so they start fights. The first battle that they fight here, the Battle of Tunmen, the Chinese win, but there's something very, very telling about what goes on here. If you notice, the Chinese boats, they have 50 junks. A junk is just a kind of a Chinese ship. And the Portuguese have 5 caravels. That's a European-style boat with, ocean-going hulls. And then they have local Siamese and Patani junks. These junks are not ocean-going vessels, and the Chinese have 50 plus of them. The Portuguese have 5 ocean-going vessels. They have to leave 2 of them, but 3 of them get out in this battle that they lose. That does not bode well for Chinese shipbuilding vis-a-vis a naval battle with, a larger European fleet. And this is going to be a reoccurring, not a whole lot right now, but especially in a few centuries, this is going to be a reoccurring motif, that China's insularness and unwillingness to kind of look elsewhere for new ideas and technology is going to kind of bite them in the ass. Eventually, though, the Chinese and the Portuguese come to an agreement that Portugal is allowed to have a trading colony in the city of Macau. Does this actually go to the origins or history? There we go. So Macau was a Chinese city. It existed before the Portuguese showed up. And they first started renting it, and then they basically got a permanent lease, paying 500 taels of silver as annual land rent. So they bribed the local officials and the government to let them be there so that they can trade. And that's in the mid 1500s that Macau becomes a permanent Portuguese settlement. Yes, Macau is basically the Vegas of China. Today, Macau is the Vegas of China. In those days, it was nothing of the sort. It was a Portuguese colony, and it was a stepping off point for all of Portugal's religious and financial hopes and dreams. But it was not I don't think a gambling establishment. So the Portuguese are now established next door to mainland China. As we get closer to the 1600s, we start seeing some cracks in the Ming establishment. Under the reign of the Wanli Emperor, we have both the. Oh no, that's not the Taiching Rebellion. That's the Taiching Emperor. Ah, sorry, I got confused. I went through a lot of history today, so you'll have to excuse me. I grabbed you for a reason. Well, there is a okay. There are revolts. And there's also the Japanese invasion of Korea. Korea was a Chinese protectorate, and so they did things to support Korea and repel the Japanese invasion. So at this point, during the late 1500s, early 1600s, Japan was a kind of rising unified power, and that was a point of concern for China. Oh, maybe I did it because of the artwork here. These are just hugely elaborate, gorgeous wall paintings that lined tombs. I'm going to try and pan all the way to the left here. You know, you can see how intricate this is, and it's full on landscape with figures. You know, this is, I believe, a funeral procession for the emperor himself. This is in a tomb, so that would make sense. And so this line, you know, it's hugely detailed, lines an entire wall of a tomb. Oh wow. It's quite the procession. So this may have
Like
been
where's Waldo?
Like someone
Almost.
from Prince Ali.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe I included him because I just wanted to put at least a little bit of arts and culture in my Great Man history. I can't remember. Sorry, folks. This isn't as smooth as I was hoping it to be. So moving on to kind of into the next few decades of the 1600s. Why did I grab you? Oh, you got a really short one. Really short. I think I was concerned about rising conservatism in court. So remember that I mentioned back with the Yongle Emperor that when he was succeeded by his son, who lasted a year and immediately kind of closed down his fleet, that was only one thing that he kind of shut things down for. But in succeeding decades and even centuries, there was just more and more insularness, more and more turning inward, and kind of relying on the way that things, at least the way that people believed they had always been. So any kind of innovation, and just to be clear, innovation is not always good. Sometimes innovation can be stupid. You're just trying something new. But if you never try anything new, you're never going to learn anything. And this was just a kind of like increasingly common attitude as the later decades of the Ming Dynasty took hold. And then the last emperor of the Ming Dynasty. Basically, there were peasant rebellions and invasions from the borders, and that's the. I'll cover that in the next section, the next dynasty. That's where they come from. Oh, you know what? I bet you I knew I. So this is blue and white porcelain. commonly a Ming vase, as was pointed out. Massive export, but also massive market for internal Chinese trade. And the blue is, I forget the mineral, cobalt, I think. But it has to be imported from the West, and from what we call the Middle East. But for the Chinese, it's the West. And
Cobalt really radioactive?
I don't know. I'm sure that there is an isotope that is radioactive, but in terms of like everyday exposure, I don't think you're in danger. But I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But this blue and white porcelain is very, very highly sought after, highly prized. And I'm sure one of those emperors that I put up there, one of the reasons I put them up there is they canceled all external trade. One of them just was like, no, outside money, outside trade, outside whatever, bad. And that meant also the cobalt. And so for a few decades, Ming porcelain wasn't as blue because they had to use a local blue dye for the porcelain. And then when that emperor died and a new one came back, they're like, we'll allow a limited amount of trade, including cobalt, so that they could make it vibrant and blue again. Okay, so we've got some help here in the text chat of the voice channel Q&A sessions. So thank you very much, both Relica and Spud, for that. If anyone wants to kind of look up on that, they can get a little bit more detail on cobalt and cobalt blue in ceramics. But yeah, so that was one of the things with this kind of emphasis on internal trade, is they actually made their own uniquely Chinese products worse, and realized that eventually, and decided to backpedal at least a little bit. During the Ming period, more or less all different arts and culture flourished. So calligraphy was highly prized and developed. We have paintings. We saw those big murals that I went over. We've got the blue and white porcelain, literature, stories. There were newspapers. So literacy was improving, because you don't have a newspaper for the everyman if the everyman can't read. I don't know what literacy rates were at the time, but there's still not anything like universal public education. So I'm going to guess that it's still a minority of the population, but it's a large enough minority that they can produce newspapers and things like that. Plays. This porcelain vase looks really cool. I thought that was I think this technique here is called cloisonné, but I'm not entirely sure. Architecture.
That's a really cool green.
Yeah, right? I thought it was pretty sweet.
Like, it's quite vibrant.
The Dutch got it from the Chinese, Spud. So the Dutch, like Delft blue, is not, I guess, imitation, but like is inspired by Chinese porcelain. And they didn't know about it until, well, I guess they would have gotten trade from like the Portuguese in Europe, but then they would, because I don't think they started making their own till 1600s, or probably closer to 1800s, to be honest. But yeah, I'm sure you could look that up.
Yeah, it looks like exactly right. I've just started to look at it. I was curious if you knew. Yeah, they started importing it, Chinese porcelain, in the 1600s, and then started making it their own in the 1700s. So
yeah, there we go. Yeah, major architectural achievements. So yeah, the Ming dynasty is generally, even though it kind of goes out with a bit of a whimper and descends into peasant revolts and famines and so on, generally considered a really good one, and of Chinese history, and a golden age. Okay. I need a wee bit of a break because that's been an hour and a half for me. If that's okay with everyone, I'm going to pause the recording. So we're back. Hoping we keep the voice, the soundboard to a minimum.
Yes, nothing happened.
Nothing happened, of course. All right. So, oh my. All right. So I've only finished 3 of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Jesus. Okay, I got a lot of things. All right, let's go. Let's do it. So we go back in time a little bit to before the Ming got kicked out of China. And I wanted to kind of to emphasize some things that were happening in the north. So the if you remember, there had been that northern Jin dynasty a few dynasties ago, and they were an amalgamation of the Jurchen peoples. And the Jurchen peoples never went away. They're still in the north and the northeast of China. And over the Ming dynasty, there were some military incursions, but mostly it was the Ming military incursions were there to impose tribute on the Jurchen people. And one of the kind of rulers in that region was so pissed off at being made into a subject peoples that he rose up in rebellion. But more than just raising up in rebellion, he proposed and later successfully did change the name of his culture group. So they no longer referred to themselves as the Jurchen, they referred to themselves as the Manchu. And I wish I knew all of the different meanings behind it, but let's just say Jurchen was associated with subservience to the Ming, and Manchu was not. And so under this guy here, I think it might be pronounced Nurhasi, but who knows? He unified the Jurchen peoples into a new polity, a new state, and directly challenged Ming control, but not as the Jurchen tribes, but as the Manchu. So Jurchen unification, and then as the Manchu, he ended up conquering the area that the northern Jin dynasty had ruled, and got their they had essentially their royal crest that had proved they had the mandate of heaven. So he inherited the northern Jin royal crest, mandate of heaven, and then he conquered the remainder, the very, very small rump of the northern Yuan dynasty. That was the Mongol dynasty that had fled up north. And he got their mandate of heaven royal crest. And so with these two essentially mandates of heaven and the renamed title, he invaded the Ming dynasty with the intention of forming a new Chinese dynasty, which would be called Great. And again, I've always said Great King because it's a Q, but I think it's Great Xing, or Jing. I think probably Jing is more accurate, and this is the final royal dynasty in Chinese history to date. And so invading from the north and walking around the Great Wall, because it's only meant to slow people down, it can't stop them. He and his successors, because again, This did not happen overnight. He started the process in 1618, and it wasn't complete until 1683. So that's like 65 years, almost 70 years of conquest to try and take over all of China. And he succeeds. He also invades Korea. And he and his successors invade Korea. And succeed in becoming the next dynasty of China. But the Ming flee to the south. And specifically, they flee to an island called Formosa. Now, that may trigger a few people's memories of a mainland Chinese government. Is Manchu related to Manchurian Candidate? I've never seen the movie, I'm sorry to say, but I imagine so, at least peripherally. A Manchu, because of the government exams, a Manchu in English for a period of time, kind of vaguely racist, but the term meant someone who was like in the bureaucratic system or even potentially brainwashed by the bureaucratic system. They were just mindlessly going through, repeating, stamping things, and so on and so forth. And I think that's the context that it's used in the Manchurian Candidate, but I'm not 100% sure. So peripherally, it is related. But the island of Formosa is in modern day called Taiwan. So a little bit on the history of Formosa here. In the 1600s, the Dutch formed a colony on it. It's this pink here. The Spanish formed a colony on it. It's this teal here. And then the indigenous peoples of Formosa kind of tried to form their own little kingdom to resist both the Dutch and the Spanish, but also resist absorption into just all of the native Chinese people that had moved to the island, because it was under colonization from mainland China. Well, when the Ming fled south, they actually allies of theirs took control of Formosa from everybody else, and we'll get to that. But I just want to, when we get to the 20th century, there's going to be another mainland Chinese government that flees to Taiwan, and I just wanted to mention that it has happened before. So we've got the sun. Yeah, okay. So once we get into the second ruler of the Qing dynasty, we start to get people who are interested more in ruling instead of necessarily conquering. Obviously, they want to finish the conquest. They want to take over all of China. But they so it's more about establishing your dynasty as a ruling dynasty rather than creating it in the first place. The thing though is that when the second emperor of this dynasty takes power, he is 5 years old, so there's not a whole hell of a lot he can do. He's a kid, and he is controlled by regents. And then when he does become of age, I think he's 22 years old, and he dies of smallpox. So he didn't really get to do a whole hell of a lot on his own.
Damn it.
Sorry?
Oh, I was saying, damn it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was just like, ugh, damn it. And then died.
Yeah.
big womp.
Yeah, exactly.
The amount of figures that have died from smallpox is insane.
Yes, get your vaccinations.
They always talk about the smallpox, but what about the large pox?
There is actually, that's greater pox. What is it?
That is a thing.
Yeah, what disease is it? I actually can't remember if it's measles. But there is
The
smallpox. Yeah, Spud. If you Google
ve-
greater pox, what is it?
Variolous virus or big pox typically refers to syphilis, known as the great pox.
Okay, that's
Mm.
Syphilis.
that's I think a more modern. There was a great pox before that, before syphilis.
Hold on. Pox is great and small. Stand by.
Unless I'm misremembering, which is entirely plausible.
Poxits.
That's it.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound that great.
No. So, once we've secured all of China, as you can see, again, this nice, easy, clean map showing all of China and its much larger extent. The Jing dynasty is, I think, the largest Chinese dynasty in terms of territory. And something that comes into effect. Remember, these are Manchu. These are not the ethnic majority in China. They are, I mean, according to many foreign conquerors. But one of the things that takes place over the centuries of the Qing dynasty is an emphasis on almost a redefinition of what is China. And so, in large part, ethnic Han dynasties refer to the majority Han areas as China. And then the areas that they conquer with other peoples, like Manchu, they are, kind of like semi-barbarian lands. And only after they've been kind of, only after they have been colonized by Han Chinese are they considered really China. But, that's a gross image. Do not want to see.
Sorry.
I'm just going to get rid of the embed. There we go. Smallpox. Looks
Sorry,
awful.
I'm like that. Yeah, it's not good.
Sorry. So, being that the Manchu are not, at least according to some, indigenous Chinese, it was part of their kind of imperial propaganda and their imperial program to more and more make their borders China's borders. So Inner and Outer Mongolia are part of China. Tibet is part of China. What we consider Xinhai is part of China. This is where Uyghurs live. And areas that are conquered in Southeast Asia are part of China. This is a slow process. Not all of these areas are called this all at once, and it just becomes more and more common over the course of this dynasty, where everything is China, and that has implications later on in a post-imperial world when previously an empire might want to conquer areas another Chinese empire had held, but it wasn't like necessary Chinese territory. It was China typically holds sway over region X, Y, and Z. But under the propaganda of the Qing, that was China proper. And if you want one China to be one state, you've got to get it back. Some of the rulers of the Qing dynasty. So this is the third emperor. Considered one of China's greatest, longest reigning rulers in history. Military achievements. Everyone he talked to, he beat up and victory and won over. So militarily very successful. He's the one who led the conquest of. Oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, all right. So first one, everyone he met, he beat up. So in the first military engagement and war between China and Russia, China won. And so the Tsardom of Russia under Tsar, looks like Peter I and Ivan V, were trying to take territory from China, and China beat the crap out of them, which I think that's pretty interesting to note. In 1689, Russia was losing wars to China. And it more or less, if I'm not mistaken, established the modern day border between the two countries. But also, so I mentioned that southern retreat into Formosa, modern day Taiwan. So the Dutch trading colony, the Spanish trading colony, and the local indigenous kingdom were all kicked out or destroyed, and a Han Chinese kingdom formed on Formosa to try and escape the mainland, and this emperor led the conquest of Taiwan and really the firm integration of Taiwan into the Qing state, into China proper of that day. Taiwan had been part of China before, but it's reasonably far off of the coast, and generally speaking, had an indigenous population that really didn't like to be bothered, and so it, sometimes they'd put in the effort to subjugate the island. A lot of times they wouldn't bother. But from the Qing period forward, so from this time period forward, it's supposed to be an integral part of China. That, and this time period is known as the High Qing era. Again, a golden age of Chinese history. Everything is coming up Milhouse, and the Chinese are very, very happy with how things are going, even though effectively disaster is waiting around the corner. They just don't know it because they are still living in a very insular world, and they don't realize how much the world around them has changed. Technologically, China was a very advanced country 400 years ago. So the end of this era is 1800. And 400 years before that, 1400, they were a very technologically advanced country. 200 years ago, 1600, they were a pretty, technologically advanced country. But come 1800, they are a backward country. And it's not just technology, but also political organization. Part of what I mentioned with the Middle Ages was the political organization where, you've got this pyramid scheme of hierarchy, and you collect your taxes by going up the chain, and it's, it may not be in cash, it'll be in goods and stuff like that. Europe had moved away from that. They had moved on to, full cash economy and a whole bunch of little tiny statelets, all competing with each other and doing things. They had democracies. They'd had the entire wars of religion. So it basically, there was a lot of variety in how Europe functioned, and a lot of innovation in the best ways to find a functioning government. In China, things had been relatively stable for centuries, and even though what they had was a fairly sophisticated, an incredibly sophisticated system, it didn't have a lot of room for innovation. It did what it did and nothing else. And that's going to become a problem when you start encountering people that don't do what you do. They do something different, and it can give them a strategic advantage. But that's, in the centuries to come, not now. Now it's the High Qing era, and things are great. And then one of the things that I just wanted to emphasize here is towards the end of this era, the Qing state engages on what are called the 10 Great Campaigns, which is, I would like to call, war with everybody. So they go to war with everybody in their immediate surroundings, either pacify or subjugate them or conquer them outright. And that just reinforces their own belief in their complete and total superiority over anyone else on Earth, because all of their immediate neighbors can't withstand them. So why would they think that they need to improve anything? What they don't realize is that the danger is coming from halfway around the world. So that's the Qing dynasty up until the High Qing period. Any questions so far on where I've gone with that?
No, it's getting to the exciting part.
There you go. Okay. Why did I pick you? Okay, so the cracks are starting to form. And this is kind of right at the beginning of the not High Qing period. So it's not necessarily the bad time. There's not revolts everywhere. But I picked this emperor because he is that transition emperor. But also, this is something that's going to become very, very important. People are attempting to smuggle opium into China. And it's overland, but very soon it's going to start coming in on boats. And it's going to be cause for some great concern. But drug trade as a form of domestic issues start to become an issue. So under his, I guess, immediate successor, that's not Dugong, Dao Guang. Dao Guang Emperor, life sucks for the Dao Guang Emperor. They rule from 1820 to 1850, and I don't know if they have 6 months of peace. So one of the things that they have to contend with is the First Opium War. And so this is a war that happens in the 1840s. And this is how England got possession of Hong Kong. But that wasn't the only reason that they fought this war. In the centuries since the Portuguese had established trade in Macau, other European powers had established trade with China in and around Macau. And one of the things that China did, I mean, it strictly restricted trade, it strictly controlled trade, and it strictly controlled how it got paid for trade. And so one of the things that China demanded was payment in silver, and only silver, because Chinese coinage was based on silver, and effectively the Chinese economy ran on silver. And unlike European governments, where they ran on silver and gold, the Chinese economy just didn't give a shit about gold. It's not that they didn't value gold. Gold was valuable, but not as money. Gold was valuable as jewelry. But silver was valuable as money to the Chinese economy. Yes. What's his name? Cornelius something or other.
It's Yukon Cornelius.
Yukon Cornelius.
Silver.
Wouldn't have had a whole lot of sway with the Chinese government of the day. So England was trading in silver to China for tea. And it's a cliche that, the Brits love tea, but they were spending like a quarter of their gross domestic product buying tea. Like just it's insane how much of the British economy was involved in getting tea, reselling tea, distributing tea, all of it. Hugely important. And they had to buy all of this tea in silver. And Britain was running out of silver. And China had nothing that they wanted to buy from Britain. They didn't give a shit about Britain at all. Except that when the English found out that addictive drugs are addictive. Speaking of green tea, Relica, I just recently found out that tea is tea. So green tea, black tea, oolong tea, all these different varieties of tea is all the same plant. And it's just how it's treated after, like how it's prepared is not like what you do, but like how the people who prepare it before it goes out as a final product. That's what dictates whether it'll be green tea or black tea or any of the other wide variety of tea. And I had no idea that that one plant could be so infinitely different. Sorry. So the Brits found out that addictive things are addictive, and that they could sell drugs to Chinese officials and get paid in silver for it. And the Chinese government naturally was like, this is bad. We don't want drug addicts for citizens or subjects. Stop. And the Brits said no. And the Chinese government tried to start imprisoning the corrupt officials who were taking payment for the sale of opium, and they just got more. Like, you know, there's no shortage of people willing to sell their countrymen out for money. And eventually, it resulted in actual open warfare. Britain demanded access to Chinese ports so that they could sell their drugs to Chinese subjects and get paid in silver. And China capitulated because they lost the war. And as part of the war, Britain also got a 99 but extendable year lease on Hong Kong. And so this is how Hong Kong came into the possession of the British. At the same time, where were they getting the drugs from? They were it's opium. So Britain controlled India, and they were making headway into Afghanistan, where poppies are, and where the modern day opium trade is concentrated. And so they were getting it from where we get it from today. And they had like direct connections to the area. Britain also did not succeed in conquering Afghanistan, but they had good enough relations with the dynasty that controlled Afghanistan, and they just paid for it. At the same time as the first Opium War, give us the poppy so you get the cannons, exactly. It's the first time the first Opium War is going on. The Taiping Rebellion is going on. I think they're contemporaneous, 1850 to 64. No, they happen after. My bad. These happen contemporaneous. The Taiping Rebellion and the Neon Rebellion are both happening in the 1850s and into the 60s. I am unable to go into all of the different minutia of what these different rebellions are about, but let's just say that the uprising was led by Hong Jiquan, an ethnic Hakka who proclaimed himself to be the brother of Jesus Christ. That sounds like a pretty good reason to follow a guy and form a rebellion. So there is a religious flavor to some of these rebellions, and they involve syncretization with religions and ideas and thoughts that are coming into China from the outside world. And remember, China's been cut off, especially from Europe, but cut off outside. And so all of these ideas, everything is new. Everything is new to China. Yes, cult. The Nian Rebellion is happening in the north of China. The Taiping Rebellion is primarily in the south. And so what you've got, also there's another Red Turban Rebellion, because of course there is. And that's happening in the southwest. And essentially what you've got is like 2/3 of the country is just in open rebellion at the same time. And that's not a great way to maintain the mandate of heaven. Also there's a second Opium War. And I can't remember what the claimed reason for this one was, if it was the same thing. But Britain once again wins. I mean, China's got huge revolts going on. They can hardly fight a foreign war. And what this allows Britain to do is gain even control over even more of the territory around Hong Kong to kind of stage their trade concessions, their trade forays into China. Most notable, Kowloon Peninsula is transferred to the British at this point in time. Kowloon will become important later, and I will talk about it then. What is... Oh, yeah, during the Second Opium War, the Brits burned down the Summer Palace in Beijing. So they burned down the part of the Forbidden City. Because, nothing says everything is safe and secure like the Imperial Gardens getting burned down.
How rude.
Right? Okay, so we've got the conquest. I think I already covered this. What was I gonna... Oh, right. So we are in the Second Opium War, which is 1860. So we're into 1860, and things are not looking good for the Qing dynasty. In 1874, Japan invades Taiwan and conquers the island. So from 1874 until a time in the future, which we will get to, Japan actually controls Taiwan. Japan, 1874. Wow. Sorry, say again?
I just said, wow.
So everyone's cutting little bits off of China at this point in time. And that results in the scramble for China. I love propaganda posters, and this is one of my favorites here, where you have, this is Japanese, French, Russian, German, and British all looking to cut up a variety of China, and then the Chinese Mandarin, the with long claws and horrific appearance, because these comics are never made by neutral parties, is horrified but also defenseless to do anything about it. And yeah, so this was a very dangerous time for the Qing dynasty. This is not like, you don't stay in power. You know that someone's going to rise up and try to take you out. But what is very different is that these powers might be from Europe that try to take you out. And I mean, what does that kind of foreign domination look like? That's something that they've never had any experience before. Every other foreign power that had taken over China had been from right next door, had a great respect for Chinese culture and Chinese history, and for the most part, turned Chinese themselves after conquering China. But these European powers had seemingly no such interest in the same thing. And so, under a successive series of emperors, some reform was finally attempted. It was way too late, and it was in the midst of chaos, but it was attempted. So this is called the self-strengthening movement, and it is a combination religious and bureaucratic and military reform that I've really just I don't have the knowledge to even try and do it justice. But that's okay because it was cut short. You know, it was way too late. It was too little, too late, and it was cut off because Japan and China went to war over Korea, and basically Korea was at this point in time still a tributary to China, and Japan ended that tributary status. They didn't fully conquer Korea until after 1910, but they became a tribute to Japan first. After this, after China lost this war. Again, reform was attempted under the Guangxu Emperor. We're getting into the 20th century now. We're in the late 1800s and the very, very early 1900s. And so he attempted what is called the 100 Days Reform in 1898. And the 100 Days Reform, again, was supposed to be one of these religious and bureaucratic and military reforms. And his mom stepped in and went, no, stop it. And so she was the Dowager Empress. And her name is Dowager, I don't know, Shishi? But immensely influential on later Chinese history. And she stepped in and said, I don't accept this reform, and then went about trying some reforms of her own that ultimately were unsuccessful. And they were the late Qing reforms, also known as Shishi's new policies. And effectively, all they did is make everything that was already terrible far worse. And at the same time, there was the Boxer Rebellion. Oh, the Boxer Rebellion was earlier. Okay. When these reforms were trying to put in place, right? Oh, no. 1895. Oh, yeah. They tried to put them in 1901 into 1912, and the Boxer Rebellion is 1899 to 1901. There we go. So the Boxer Rebellion is another one of these large-scale peasant revolts. But this one was a little different in that it focused less on how bad the government was and how we needed to overthrow the government, and actually focused on how bad the foreigners were. And so it targeted all of the European consulates and things like Christianity. It targeted Christian converts in China. And generally speaking, was to a certain extent pro-regime, but a populist uprising. And so the Dowager Empress thought she could take control of this, and instead of attacking the Boxer Rebellion, she could just support it and have it do the work for her of eliminating the European influences. And powerful peasant rebellions had taken out entire Chinese dynasties in the past. So why wouldn't it be able to just kick out a couple of, European colonists? I mean, they were not even necessarily colonists. They have barely a toehold in the country because they have these like consulates, and that's it. These like small little coastal fortified positions, and that's it. So how could, a full-scale rebellion not be able to destroy them? Well, if you don't have modern weapons and modern strategy and access to boats that let you just leave and then come back and attack, you don't really have a chance. If you are a land-based revolt against a sea-based technologically and techniquely superior enemy, you're done. Yes, sea cannons, exactly. And that's exactly what happened. It's not that the European powers could have beaten them in an open fight. If the European powers had just fielded all the armies that they had all at the same time and faced off against the Boxers would have suffered greatly, but the Boxers would have won. But the fact of the matter is that they used superior techniques and technology against the Boxers in more advantageous situations, and they were able to absolutely annihilate them. Let's see if we can. So there were up to 400,000 troops in the combined royal forces and Boxers. Up against, actually the Russians had up to 200,000. Wow, that's crazy. And the Boxers lost, although they didn't. Most of those deaths seem to be civilians. The Christian converts were massacred by the Boxers. So ultimately, I guess they just lost the initiative, and the Europeans just refused to leave because they didn't have to. The defeat of the Boxer Rebellion by the foreign powers was more or less the nail in the coffin of the Qing dynasty, and it led directly to the 1911 revolution that ended the last imperial dynasty. So before I get into this tab, it does. The Americans were involved entirely. They had more than just supply ships. Oh, you didn't say supply ships. You said ships. Yes, the Americans were involved as well. It wasn't just Europeans. But does anybody have any questions on the kind of long, ponderous death of the Qing dynasty?
Was the original downfall just basically due to like atrophy, essentially? Like things were too good at the beginning, and then just it kind of slowly decayed. Kind of, is that what started? Was the initial downfall, or was that decay in the preceding time, and that kind of led them like the preceding dynasty was decaying already, and then they kind of inherited that?
It was a failure to make any adaptations. So the revolts that started breaking out and causing all kinds of drama throughout the countryside were at least in part related to the European presence. And it's not that they were in reaction to, just the Europeans brought new things into China that changed ideas, changed attitudes. And so they caused disruption when by bringing in new ideas when no new ideas had been had for quite some time. So it wasn't decay as it was stagnation. The Chinese state had stagnated, but they were happily stagnated because that meant it was peaceful, or at least relatively speaking peaceful, and balance was maintained. And then the apple cart, as it were, gets upset when Europeans come out of the just the very existence of the Europeans, that they are a powerful country that does things very differently from the Chinese. And the Chinese failed at that point to realize that doing something different, at least knowing what that different thing was a good idea. They just decided their way is better, obviously, and ignored any potential learning from Europeans. The Japanese took the opposite perspective, and they said, we recognize that the Europeans have some things in superior to the way that we do them. So let's co-opt the best things that the Europeans can have to offer us and use them in ways we want and we like. And that allowed them to, I mean, be the bad guys in World War II, but also just that allowed them to weather the storm a lot better than China. China basically stuck their head in the sand and pretended like everyone else still was subservient to them, and Japan recognized their own weakness and decided to adopt what they wanted from Europeans and fiercely suppress what they didn't want. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Funny thing, it's why Christianity's never had a huge foothold in Japan.
They did for a while, and then they all got murdered.
Yep. That's government ordered it.
The TV series Shogun actually covers early Christian advances in so that's 1600s, early Christian advances in Japan, and then they don't cover it in the first season, but I imagine they will in the second, the subsequent suppression of those advances.
Yeah. Yeah, anything that the
All-
government doesn't want, they suppress it massively.
Yeah. Sorry, someone was.
Especially if there's a cult with Jesus's brother. When Jesus's brother's around, you gotta watch out.
I mean, he's pretty powerful. He's gonna get you. Not even James; it's some other guy.
Steve
It
is
took
his
a long
name.
time for Buddhism to go from China to Japan. The first time it tried, it didn't take. I forget what the man's name was that came from China that managed to get Japanese culture to finally take in Buddhism. But it became so part of the culture that Shintoism and Buddhism are both well recognized within the country now.
Yeah. There's a very specific variety of Buddhism that flourished in Japan. It's called Pure Land Buddhism, and it's an offshoot of. Oh God, hold on. Let me go back in time to Intro Religion Studies. Hold on. Mahayana Buddhism. So it's an offshoot of Mahayana Buddhism, which is popular in China. But it is its own distinct stream, and I think that it's largely only found in Korea and Japan. I don't think that it has many adherents in China, but I could be wrong about that. And then Shintoism was little more than a folk religion before the 19th century. It was really just kind of like folk religion that Japanese people did, and then with
It's
the
a religion without being a religion.
to a certain extent, yeah.
It doesn't have a doctrine. It doesn't have a book.
Well, it does have a doctrine. The emperor is divine, and that it's effectively emperor worship, and it that grew during the 19th century into the 20th century, with the emperor taking a much more active role in Japanese society. But that's getting beside the point. Sorry, I wish I'd put more religion in this, but there was no space for anything.
We could do it another time.
Yeah. Any
We can start
other?
our own religion with blackjack and hookers.
Yeah. Benderism. Any other questions before I jump into the early 20th century and how things you thought they were bad already, they're going to get a whole hell of a lot worse in China?
Sounds exciting.
All right. So, in 1911, there was the Xinhai Revolution, and that forcibly caused the last emperor, Emperor Puri. Is he on here? Anyway, he had to abdicate, and the end of Great Qing, the end of dynasties. There was no more a mandate of heaven. It was all done, and everything was done. We're all fine here. Boring conversation anyway. And that raised the question: what now? You know, China had been governed by ruling monarchs. Maybe not a singular monarch over all of China, but like ruling monarchs. Monarchy was the only way of governance in China. And in the early 20th century, an individual named Sun Yat-sen became the first president of the Republic of China. He founded his first political party, and he won democratic-ish elections. And the funny thing is, Sun Yat-sen is revered by both the People's Republic of China, the communists, and the government in Taiwan, the former Republic of China, as the guy who started modern day China. So that's kind of interesting. He instituted, provisional government, tried to create a functioning republic in place of just the utter chaos that the 19th century had been. And he runs smack dab into the warlord era, where effectively, former generals, petty criminals, gang leaders from around China more or less founded their own fiefdoms, their own little areas, and started fighting with each other over who was going to rule China. And this was impossible to govern. You couldn't raise an army because you had no idea how loyal they would be, depending on where they came from in the country. They might side with, 2 or 3 different warlords. And it was just an absolutely awful period of time. People died. It's chaos in the streets, and not a positive experience. One of the I think he was he one of the warlords, or I think he was a warlord. Anyway, Chiang Kai-shek is the man who rises to the leadership after Sun Yat-sen dies. He was the military commander of the Republic of China, and he starts the process of subduing all of the different warlords. So even though it's utter chaos, over time, the Republic of China is starting to establish stability, or some semblance of stability, in the country. At the same time as he's putting down the warlords, another leader in China, Mao Zedong, is starting up a communist revolution in China. He is adapting the communist teachings from the Soviet Union, because that has happened now. We're in the 20th century. And he is adapting it for China. His little red book is known as Communism with Chinese Characteristics. And one of the things that it does away with, in traditional communism, you have to go through capitalism first. You have to have a disenfranchised peasant class in the city working like day laborer jobs to rise up and take out the bourgeoisie. So you need people living in cities. You need established economies. That's the way that communism is supposed to arise, according to traditional communist thought. China doesn't have this. China does not have an industrial base. China does not have an urban base. It has cities, of course, and it has cities with large populations. But the vast, vast, vast majority of the populace are peasants living in the countryside on subsistence agriculture, because that's China's economy. And so communism with Chinese characteristics just means I get to call my authoritarianism communism, and we're just going to do it our own way and do our own thing. Early on in the kind of Chinese communist attempts at seizing power or moving towards power, things don't go their way. The Republic of China under Chiang Kai-shek really has the initiative and really has the ability to put things down that they don't like. Look at this man smile. And then read that. And then we look at the death toll. Oh, it's only 5 to 10,000. Minimal for Chinese deaths, which is kind of sad. However, in order to stymie the growth of the Chinese Communist Party, Chiang Kai-shek initiates the Shanghai Massacre, which he hopes puts the Chinese communists out. It doesn't. And it somewhat it hardens the Chinese Communist Party. They don't have as much of the same kind of ideological falling out that a lot of communist movements in other countries have had. And also it somewhat ingratiates the populace to the Chinese party, because they're getting massacred by the government, and all they're doing is promising everyone's going to eat and we're all going to have education, and that's all they want to do. Promise. That's it. So things start off rather poorly for the Chinese Communist Party, but that's not the end of the story. During the 1930s, the Chinese Communist Party is actually routed from almost everywhere that it controls, and it engages on what's called the Long March. And effectively what this means is they are engaging in constant retreat and guerrilla warfare, escaping from Republic of China control and attacks, and retreating further and further into kind of no man's land of China, further and further into the countryside. But again, their message is well received by those in the countryside, so they kind of find allies. And in the midst of the Republic of China attempting to eliminate the Communist Party, a fully modernized Japan invades. And they invade the area in the northeast called Manchuria. This is where the Manchu come from. And the invasion of Manchuria leads to the formation by Japan, instead of just annexing the entire area, which Japan was worried would get them a little too much bad press. Japan annexes a little bit of territory. By this point in time in history, they've also already annexed Korea. They annexed Korea about 20 years prior to this. And then they set up the rest of the Northeast as a puppet state called Manchukuo, or Manchukuo. And they declare that this is essentially the Empire of Manchuria. And they bring somebody out of retirement. The last emperor of China is a guy named Puyi, Puyi, and they set him up as emperor again in Manchuria. And so he is there to rubber stamp all of the Japanese policies and attitudes, and rule, sort of, in quotation marks. But the Republic of China, even though it's trying to modernize and it's trying to kind of get its way out of the kind of old imperial system, has nothing on the Japanese army, and they just fold. They are not able to withstand the Japanese invasion in the slightest. 50,000 dead in in the invasion of Chinese soldiers. And so this is the beginning of the Second World War. And where things had been going very well for the Republic of China and very poorly for the Communist Party of China, now it seems to be going very poorly for both of them. And I guess the Second World War is in between these. So during the course of the Second World War, Japan takes over further and further parts of China, largely fighting against Republic of China forces. The Chinese Communist Party figured they'd just sit this one out, raise their they get aid from the Soviet Union and just sort of build their forces and wait. There's an official ceasefire during the Second World War because they're being invaded by Japan, but they would just rather let the Republic of China fight the Japanese than doing it themselves. And that has implications after the end of the war. So by 1945, Japan is defeated, and Manchuria is conquered by is taken by the Soviets, and the Soviets allow the Chinese Communist Party to slip into Soviet control, like Soviet Union territory, in behind the Soviet Union lines, and then essentially take control of Manchuria before the Soviets leave, infuriating the Republic of China. But what are they going to do? They just got their asses handed to them by Japan. They'll certainly also get their asses handed to them by the Soviet Union. And so now the Chinese Communist Party has an established base of control in northeastern China, and the Chinese Civil War can begin again in earnest. Except that the Republic of China is exhausted after fighting Japan for 5 years, and the Chinese Communist Party, or the People's Republic of China, is fresh, hasn't had to fight anybody, and is getting massive resupply from the Soviet Union. Doesn't go well for the Republic of China. And they retreat further and further south, giving up more and more territory to the communists, until eventually they have to retreat to Taiwan, which is a repeat of the Song Dynasty fleeing south from the north. And so by 1949, which is the end of the Chinese Civil War, we have the Chinese Communist Party in control of the majority of mainland China, missing some areas, and then the Republic of China only in control of Taiwan. And the Republic of China has intent on reinvading the mainland, trying to take over China again, but it never sees fruition. But what does happen when they establish the UN, when the victors of World War II established the United Nations, the Republic of China is given a permanent seat on the Security Council, not the People's Republic of China. So Taiwan is given a seat on the Security Council, and that's the permanent seat with veto as a major contributing member. Once once the People's Republic of China takes control over majority of mainland China, they start turning their attentions to outlying areas. Remember what I said about these kind of outlying areas becoming part of China proper during the Qing Dynasty, the Manchu Dynasty? Well, that's how Communist China is treating them as well. Taiwan's not allowed to be an independent country because it's never been an independent country because it's part of China. Got to conquer it. And that is how they behave with all of the outlying areas. The Korean War starts up in the 1950s, and this is a UN mission, believe it or not. So the North invades the South, and the UN steps in to push the North back out as not as peacekeepers, but as actual soldiers fighting for South Korea's existence. And when the Southern soldiers and UN forces get beyond I can't remember the name of the river. Is it the Yalu River? Anyway, when they get into the north, China doesn't like this because Korea belongs to China, at least as a mental they're meant to be a tributary of China, and this is not what they wanted. They invade, or they counterattack. China is brought in by North Korea to counterattack the UN push up, and they essentially cause the stalemate. They are able to, because they have millions upon millions of troops, they're able to freeze the conflict that is still ongoing today, where the border of North and South Korea is basically where it was immediately following Chinese intervention. And the North is still a tributary to China to this day. Upset with the idea that, Taiwan is also not part of China. We have what are called the Taiwan Straits Crisis, where in the 1950s, mainland China tried to, get Taiwan. And this is where the United States basically steps in, and through the first and second Taiwan Straits Crisis, guarantees the independence of Taiwan. And essentially puts the United States in between the two Chinas to try and ensure that the Republic of China continues to exist. And I should state at this point in time, both the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China are horrific authoritarian governments that oppress their people, and I wouldn't want to live in either one of them. It's just that in mainland China, they do it because communism, and on Taiwan, they do it because nationalism. So that's that section. Does anybody have any questions on what I just covered there? Anybody still awake?
Definitely still awake.
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Wandering
Yeah.
questions.
Okay. So,
yes, sir.
Yeah, please.
It was more. Sorry, I was lagging a bit. It was more when you were talking about the Long March or whatever. I'm assuming that is somewhat related to this rocket series that has been in development for a long time.
Yes. So,
I believe it.
I should probably be clarifying here too as well. I don't like the Chinese Communist Party, and I characterize every one of their actions in what I would consider to be what I think is fair, but what they would consider to be horrendously unfair and very, very prejudiced. But anyway, they think the Long March was a great success. And so it would absolutely not surprise me to find out that they commemorate the victory of the Long March and the heroism of the Long March with a series of rockets.
Okay, I was curious about that because you were talking about, the Long March like it was this not great thing, and then I'm thinking in the back of my head, there's no way that this rocket is not named after this event.
Exactly. It's just
no,
that
yeah.
yeah, they've just got their own perspective on it. and I have the right perspective.
United States has the same
Interesting.
thing with Minutemen.
The Minutemen missile, and then the Minutemen. I don't actually know what a Minuteman is in the United States history.
What,
The
what's
Minuteman
it?
is the
reference?
Patriots of the American Revolution. Basically, the American militia.
Oh, okay. So the traitors.
Yes, yes.
Traitors to your rightful king.
Future firework purchasers.
Yeah, we have our own myth. Those that fled from the Patriots, as you call them, when their land was expropriated because they didn't want to betray their king, they came to Canada as United Empire Loyalists. And so, yeah, that's what we call them. Okay, anything further on the horrifically tragic early to mid 20th century of Chinese history? Okay, I'm going to get into even more deaths. Oh God. But I've got two things left. I'm going to go longer than 3 hours. Jesus. Okay. I thought I was going too fast, but I now think I was probably lagging too much.
You're fine.
Thanks. So after Mao had essentially eliminated his immediate challengers outside the country and either conquered them or been unable to conquer them and just sneers at them across the Taiwan Straits, he decided to start improving Chinese society internally. And this is with the Great Leap Forward, which was a series of policies meant to industrialize the country. And it led to the deaths of, as the Wikipedia article said, between 15 and 55 million people. I don't really think it was a good policy. This is this is along the similar lines to other kind of forced collectivization programs in different communist countries, where they want to improve society for the whole, and they don't really care how many millions they murder along the way, as long as the end result is better, and thus it justifies the ends do justify the means. Again, I'm biased. Sue me. I don't know enough about all of the specifics of the Great Leap Forward. I remember that there was something. I think it was the Four Pests, where they declared war on birds because they would eat the grain, and so you had to go kill all the birds in the countryside and stuff. It was bananas. But the end result was that China started the process of industrializing. So they started a process of moving towards a less agrarian economy, less focused on in a fully agrarian economy, 90% of your people are engaged in food production, and then 10% of the people do everything else. And as you industrialize, you replace human labor with mechanical labor or animal labor with mechanical labor. And you can get that number down from 90% to, I think it's probably less than 2% in most industrialized countries where people are engaged in food production, which is just bananas. It's crazy how many people we can feed with so few people doing the work. They didn't reach those numbers during the Great Leap Forward, but they did improve it. I don't know exactly by how much. And of course, those that died knowing they were making their country better for communism. I think the whiskey's starting to work for me, so I'm going to get a little bit more flippant, which is unfortunate because these are millions of dead people. Anyway, moving along. Up until the late 1950s, the Chinese Communist Party and the Soviet Union had been best of friends, but they had been best of friends under two very specific assumptions. One, the assumption from the Soviet Union side was that China was a junior partner and would do anything and everything that Soviet Union said. And two, according to China, they were equal partners and they would share in their information exchange. And so China did not like the idea of the Soviet Union dictating anything. And they felt that that was a violation of their previous relationship. And the Soviet Union didn't feel like they had a peer. They dictated to everybody. And so when Stalin died and Stalin's successor, Khrushchev, started a process of what we call de-Stalinization, which is ending a cult of personality around a single leader and trying to focus more on, collective leadership, the greater good, and that sort of thing. They also wanted other communist countries to do the same. Yugoslavia, which was not a Soviet client, told them to go fuck themselves because Tito really liked his cult of personality. And China told them to go fuck themselves because Mao absolutely loved his cult of personality. It's not entirely about this. And also the Yugoslavia split happened a little earlier because Stalin kept trying to murder Tito. And Tito sent Stalin a letter saying, stop sending assassins. If you keep sending them to me, I'm going to send one your way and I'll only need one. And then Stalin stopped sending assassins. But anyway, the breakup really was also about border conflicts. China and the Soviet Union shared a very long border, and it wasn't exactly to everyone's liking where those borders ended up, especially in the aftermath of the Second World War. And so there was actually a minor war fought. I didn't put that in here because I don't know the full details of it. But definitely there was elements of control over Mongolia as well. Because of course Mongolia is supposed to be part of the Chinese sphere of influence. Because again, all of these regions under the Qing dynasty had been declared China, not, border regions. But the most important thing to note is that China and the Soviet Union have a falling out, and that never really gets repaired. Pardon me. In his later years, Mao rules for an extremely long period of time. And in his later years, he finds that control is slipping away from him. He's actually being sidelined by other members of the party. And when he sees this happening, he engineers something which is called the Cultural Revolution. And essentially what this means is he starts up a student a student uprising, effectively. He sponsors a student uprising in China to attack those in power. Now, he's technically the most in power, but he's been sidelined. And there's, 5 to 10 other party officials that are responsible for other things. And through the Cultural Revolution, he is actually able to engineer the downfall of all of these other individuals, put himself back in firm control of the country, and I think probably set China back another 10 or 15 years, maybe longer, in terms of technological evolution and understanding, because the Cultural Revolution is very anti-elitist. It's essentially an eat the rich program. Even though it's a communist country, that's the idea. Those in power, absolutely, they're the worst. They're the elites. Destroy them. And yeah, I mean, you hear the massacre of Guanji. It includes acts of cannibalism and massacres. The great and where's the death toll on this one? Do they list it? I don't think they list it here. But it is often referred to as the 10 years of chaos or the 10 years of havoc. The Cultural Revolution does severe damage to Chinese history, Chinese culture, Chinese progress. And it's only ended with the death of Mao in 76. Pretty sure that's when he dies. Loading. Yeah. Only ends with the death of Mao in 76. And with the death of Mao, China actually goes through its own process of de-Stalinization, where they decide no single individual should ever get the same amount of power that Mao had, and they have to engage in things like collective leadership and so on. All lessons that the Soviet Union had learned post-Stalin, and that the Soviet Union had tried to teach China, but of course not teach in a nice way, teach in a, hey idiot, listen way. And so China themselves learned it, 25 years later. And they put in a lot of rules that have only recently been changed, and I'll get to that. But it was meant to protect the Chinese state from another power-hungry tyrant that would never give up power. It's at this time in the early 1970s when reality is unfortunately coming to fruition, or coming to realization, and the Republic of China in Taiwan is clearly not the government in control of all of China. It's the People's Republic of China. And so the permanent seat on the Security Council in the UN is transferred in 1971 to the People's Republic of China. And this is a huge blow for the Republic of China in Taiwan, because that was, their main legitimating factor. And now, are they even a country if people won't even recognize them? The People's Republic of China has, since the very beginning, referred to Taiwan as a province in rebellion. And, how much longer do they have if that's what their status is? And this is followed up by the 1972 visit of Richard Nixon to China. If you've ever heard only Nixon could go to China, that's what this visit was. Nixon was an arch anti-communist. Nixon was, a staunchly conservative, pro-America figure. And so the saying, only Nixon could go to China, is basically, only Nixon could have had the cultural cachet to say it's worth talking to these people and have people believe them. Because if any Democratic leader, and half of the Republican caucus at the time, but if any Democratic leader had gone, they would just say, well, they're just a pinko commie anyway. No one would say that Richard Nixon was a pinko commie, except maybe Donald Trump today. But, that's because he, anyway. So Nixon going to China is opening the People's Republic of China to the Western world after 30 years of really not a lot of contact. And this starts to increase after the death of Mao in 76. Some miscellaneous items of cultural significance. The People's Republic of China has always, not always, sorry, I should rephrase, has always wanted to tell people how many children they're allowed to have, but only officially had laws governing how many children people could have from the 1970s into the. I think that they've finally fully abolished it. Yeah, you can have as many children as you want now. And this was known informally as the One China or One Child policy. The One Child policy, um, in theory, has a good basis. In a developing country like China was in the 1970s, there is a known. It's called the Malthusian trap, and basically what it means is, as standards of living increase, the amount of children that live past 6 months increases. And so whereas historically you would have a family that might have 5 children, only 2 would live to adulthood. Now you have 5 children, 5 live to adulthood. And countries double, triple, quadruple, or sextuple in size in a single generation. And they're unable to deal with the massive increase in population. They don't have schools. They don't have the economic size to give everyone jobs, and it leads to disaffected youth, violence, gangs, wars, and then that standard of living goes down. And it's called the trap because you basically improve things, you get a massive spike in population, which sets everything on fire, which causes things to go down, and then it just forever circle. So this was a way that China was trying to avoid that trap by strictly controlling how many children you could have. Because at this time and potentially into the future, female children have next to no value in Chinese society, this led to a whole lot of abandoned births and or you know just eliminated female babies and a whole lot of male babies. And so China has a bit of a demographic problem when it comes to how many kids or the kids' genders. This, you could argue that this is an unintended consequence, and I think it's probably fair. I've been fairly unfair to the Chinese Communist Party because they like to murder their own people. But that was the impact. It was later softened so that you could have 2 kids, and then 3 kids, and now, as it says here, they are no longer subject to any. The other thing is, once you reach a certain level of development, once you're a highly developed country, people tend to just not have kids anyway, or they'll only have 1 kid or 2 kids just by choice, because they can't, they don't have time for more. I mean, can you imagine if you've got both parents working, having 5 kids? That's insane.
Mhm.
Okay, so moving along to Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping is one of the most, if not the most influential leader in China post Mao. I guess until Xi Jinping changed everything. So Deng Xiaoping is just highly influential. There we go. I don't need more. I don't need more than that. He decided. So he comes into power after Mao. He's part of these individuals that wanted to make sure that no one person can take control. And he wants to open China up into a more of a market economy, more of an economy like the West. And he wants to open China to the West. And throughout the 1980s, that's exactly what happens. China starts to open up more and more to the West. Until 1989, when I don't know why that's blue now. And oh god, where'd my other button go? Oh, it's a group. Firefox is too smart for me. In 1989, there was a student protest in Tiananmen Square in Beijing. We have often characterized this as purely about democracy, but it was more than just democratic reforms that they wanted. These students wanted the state out of their lives. These students wanted the freedom to just be that that they knew people in the West enjoyed, and that they knew that they didn't have. And it's quite telling that also in 1989 came the fall of the Berlin Wall, which is kind of the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union. And in that scenario, the order never came to shoot to kill, and the wall came down. Whereas in God, how did I make this so stupid? How did I break this? In Tiananmen Square, the order to shoot came pretty quick, and tanks were deployed against civilians. We have all seen, or at least I hope most everyone has seen. There's where's the tank boy? Very, very famous. Cannot tell me that they don't have that in the. Oh my god!
Are you talking about the guy that got ran over by the tank?
I don't think he actually got run over. I think he stood down the tank, but I don't actually know.
Oh, really? I don't know either. I just know every time I see the video of the guy in the tank, it always like cuts out, and I just assume it cuts out because he gets ran over, but I don't know.
Okay, so this is a fairly low res image. A couple of years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
oh yeah, here it is. God. Oh no, give me something more high res than that. Oh shoot.
Maybe you need YouTube. I don't know.
I think, come on, you gotta have a poorer quality one. There was an even worse one,
Tanks for nothing, Wikipedia.
right? Come on. I saw like a massive, massive one.
Giggity.
No, it's still the same thing. Well, anyway, I don't want to say. You can see that is him. That is a guy, and that is a row of tanks, and he's just coming home from the grocery store, and he just defiantly stops in front of these tanks. Yeah, that's the close-up. That's the one that we had in the 80s. Spud has put it into the Q&A session chat, and I've got it up here too. It's just, this is a very powerful image in and of itself. It's just that the more recent photo where we can see the full backdrop of Tiananmen Square and how he is alone, I just thought was more powerful. But this was the image. And I honestly don't know. I'm sure actually that the Wikipedia article tells us whether he dies or not.
I'm watching it now, and at one point he like climbs up on the tank.
Oh wow! Yeah, you know what? I've never actually watched the video.
I'm skipping ahead. He like climbs up on top.
Anyway, this was the symbol of authoritarianism in 1989, and it was alive and well in the Chinese People's Republic of China. And that's the kind of the double legacy of Deng Xiaoping, where he opened up the country to economic liberalization, but he did not open it up to cultural or democratic liberalization. Also,
At least from the video, he does not get ran over or I don't know about the rest.
Good. Sorry, was that Relica?
No.
No,
Oh,
sorry. Relica
my
was
hubby
asking
was
you.
just mentioning. My hubby was just asking something about a monk possibly lighting himself on fire there.
I don't know about all the different cases. That's the self-immolation. And I know that Tibetan monks engaged in the 80s and 90s that kind of protest. That also may have happened at the Tiananmen Square protests. I don't know, but that is a form of protest that Tibetan monks have used in China to protest various forms of treatment, self-immolation, burning themselves to death.
I remember seeing something on TV about it in the 90s and my parents telling me not to stay in the room,
Yeah, it's pretty
but
horrific.
I could still hear the TV.
Yeah, it's not a pleasant way to die, and it's a uniquely horrific form of public suicide. Yeah, I would prefer not to chat about it too much, but it is a thing that absolutely happens. I don't know if it happened during the Tiananmen Square protests. But it is a sign of a horrendously repressive autocratic regime and people that feel they have no other way of speaking out. There's a little bit of a tonal shift towards economics in the next couple of tabs. So, do people have any other further commentary or questions on the protests themselves, or just the things that I've covered so far? Okay, with nothing
And
further.
I'm muted.
Sorry?
Sorry, I was gonna say no, I don't. I said I was muted when I was trying to talk, so I failed. But yes, continue on.
All good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into a couple of the economic reforms that Deng Xiaoping tried to put in, and kind of talk about it as like a tale of two companies. So Lenovo, the computer manufacturer, is a direct result of the reforms of Deng Xiaoping. And Lenovo was founded in China as effectively North American or European style company. They wanted to list it in Western stock exchanges, and they knew this. It was founded with assistance from the Chinese government, but Chinese state-owned companies didn't have to adhere to things like proper reporting or auditing or anything, anything that makes a company like a good, worthwhile investment that you can audit. And they wanted something different. And so Lenovo was founded explicitly to be that kind of different sort of company. And it was founded in cooperation with Hong Kong, which at the time was part of the British Empire. Well, I guess technically, like it was an overseas territory of Britain. And it was meant to be auditable. This was the first attempt at like a normal modern company by Chinese in China's history. And for the most part, it's been a success. I mean, Lenovo is a hugely popular and profitable international brand, and they were able to buy legitimacy, literally buy legitimacy, when they bought the IBM personal computer line and ThinkPad line in I think 2004. And in which case they IBM was known as the business machines, like it's international business machines. IBM is you know what's the phrase? Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM, and so it's the safe alternative. And so Lenovo literally bought that legitimacy outright by purchasing IBM's personal computer market, and it seems to have been a great success. And I think it's a legitimate company in the same way that like a Western company would be a legitimate company, even though it's headquartered in China. And it's very, very different, very, very different from other companies like Huawei, or I mean any number of the other Chinese companies. Like literally any other Chinese company adheres to Chinese standards, which don't really give a shit about auditing, because they're just going to make up the numbers anyway. And then at the same time, or around the same time, the government in Taiwan recognizes that technology is going to be a huge key to the future. And so they found TSMC, which is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And TSMC's mission at the time was to do something that no one on Earth was doing, which is contract silicon manufacture. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but essentially the idea was everyone made their own things when TSMC was founded. And TSMC was operating under the assumption that there's going to be people who don't want to make their own things, but want a thing. And there's going to be people who do want to make their own things, but suck at it. And they're going to need a specialist to make the thing. And that's the bet that they made. And for the first 5 years of the company's existence, it did not pay off. And they were rolling around waiting for bankruptcy. And then all of a sudden overnight, it absolutely paid off. And now TSMC is one of the major reasons why people believe Taiwan still exists as a country, because it is the most capable silicon manufacturer in the world. And if you attack Taiwan, it is a known thing that they will blow up TSMC. Basically, if the mainland wants to take TSMC away by conquering Taiwan, then TSMC will just get blown up. And it's hugely, all modern microprocessors require the manufacturing process from TSMC. It is a hugely profitable, hugely important company. But both mainland China and the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China on Taiwan in the 1980s made big bets on technology because they recognized that that's where the world was moving, and they were both right. And this is in stark contrast. Even the People's Republic of China, which I've been very unfair to and characterized very negatively, stark contrast to the dynasties in the previous centuries, where they would much rather stick their head in the sand and let the world pass them by, because they were so confident in their own way of doing things as the superior way. Okay, so that's it for kind of the 80s. Any questions, any comments, anything anybody wants to go into on that? No?
I'm gonna say, in all honesty, I until right now, I did not realize that TSMC was based out of Taiwan.
Oh, well, there you go. I mean, that's why we do these things, right? Learn new
Yeah,
things.
that's cool. Yeah, I'm intimately familiar with TSMC. Yeah, they're big time. Anyways, carry on.
Okay, thank God I'm on the last set of tabs. Okay. Well, this is one of the coolest things that has ever existed, will ever exist, and I definitely would feel stupid if I'd never included it. Remember when I said that the Second Opium War gained for Britain the Kowloon Peninsula in and around Hong Kong? So Kowloon is well, it's a region, it's a peninsula, but there is something that developed over time called the Kowloon Walled City in Hong Kong. And what this was a fortress that had been set up by the Qing dynasty outside of Hong Kong. And when Britain conquered, or when Britain got the peninsula from the Qing dynasty, in the verbiage of the transfer agreement, it was stated something to the effect of government property stays with the government, everything else transfers to the British to be leased for X number of years. And since this was a fortress, it was government property. But the Qing dynasty was in utter chaos and had no interest in manning it or administering it or doing anything about it. And so what ended up happening is, and you can see the kind of the former foundations and the walls of the fortress around here. Within this boundary developed a no man's land of anything goes. There was no government because the British were held by treaty to not go in there, and the Qing dynasty, which ostensibly had rights to it, had no interest in going in there, or ability really. And so organized chaos came about. These are all apartment buildings, and they're all built with no building codes. There's electricity throughout. There's water and water and waste collection throughout, but there's no building codes. There's no safety regulations. It's just utter chaos, and just a massive confluence of humanity. Sadly, it was torn down in the handover, but this is the inspiration for the futuristic hellscapes of Blade Runner. This is the inspiration for 100 other movies that you've seen. I was trying to think of some movies that took the inspiration from this, and The Remnant of Humanity. This is a deep cut of a bad movie that I loved, but The Remnant of Humanity in of course the name has escaped me now. An Intelligent Guard. Why can't I think of Fox Animation, late 90s. Anyone help me out here? No? All right.
Titan AE?
Titan AE, thank you. The Remnant of Humanity spaceship is based on Kowloon Wall City. A whole bunch of things, just literally hundreds of movies. I wish I could do it justice. I could talk for 3 hours just on the Walled City if I knew enough about it. I highly recommend you just read or watch anything you can on the subject.
So when was it torn down?
I thought it was during the handover, but
And this is in Hong Kong?
yes. Literally, it's like just outside of Hong Kong proper. But it's on the territory that the British controlled for Hong Kong. It was torn down in 93.
And so what caused it was the transition from China controlling it to Britain controlling it? Is that kind of
Yes. So I'll say it again. In the treaty that granted control over this whole territory, this whole region, to Britain, there was language that said anything that is like government property is under the jurisdiction of the emperor. So British, no. And this was a fortress. This had been a fortress. And you can see the kind of foundation outlines of the fortress.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the British didn't go in there because that was imperial territory. But the imperial government was so fractured and distracted and incompetent that they couldn't go in there even if they wanted to. And so it became a no man's land where you could just go in there and do whatever you wanted. Of course, when that happens, somebody takes control. And so it was also a massive thieves' den of gang activity. But it's also fun to romanticize that it was super interesting and cool.
It's funny that this comes up because there's a YouTuber that I follow, and he does like builds in Minecraft, and he in his latest video he's building a build that's based off of Kowloon City or whatever. And at the time, I had no freaking idea where it was, what it was about, or anything. That's so interesting that small.
Well, I'm glad to spread the love. I only found out about this in university. I mean, this was in existence for all of my childhood and into my early adulthood, and I didn't know that. And actually, no, I guess if it was demolished in '93, I was still a kid. But regardless, I'd never heard of it. I had no idea. And when I was in university, in one of my courses, we talked about it, and I just instantaneously became enamored. It's just so. To me, it's infinitely interesting. Apparently, also the buildings were getting too tall, and it was obstructing the approach for the Hong Kong airport. But like they couldn't do anything about it because it was like they didn't have any jurisdiction over it. And also they're like, how the fuck are you building these buildings so tall? They should all just fall over. You have no safety standards. So, yeah. I'm sure it's probably a good thing that it's gone because of, I don't know, like horrible spread of disease or something. But like it's one of these things I'm endlessly fascinated by. Yeah.
So how long was it?
I'm sure
How
it would
many
have
years was it
collapsed
there?
at some point.
It
Oh,
started.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it started to get built in well, the Second Opium War. Oh god. Second Opium War would have transferred ownership in 1860. But that doesn't mean that they started any kind of construction there. It says here it's part of British Hong Kong de facto from 1912 forward. But my guess is actually major construction probably started after 1945. And specifically,
Jeez, that's a long time.
yeah, and specifically, it probably was populated by evacuees from the mainland because that's when the Civil War was going on. So a bunch of them would have gone to Taiwan, and then quite a few people would have gone to Hong Kong, and I bet you that quite a few of them ended up in the walled city.
In 1987, it was the most densely populated place on Earth.
Yeah.
Oh, I just thought of something terrible. China is known for having people die in their walls.
In their walls?
Great Wall of China. There's supposed to be a lot of bodies in there.
Oh, I thought you were like talking about like when the mafia, makes somebody disappear while a building's being built.
I mean, same thing.
Yeah. So
Just at an imperial scale.
Yeah. So Kowloon Walled City was just one of the coolest things about Hong Kong. I highly recommend. I'm sure there's videos on YouTube. Highly recommend watching any and all of them. But this is getting towards modern China, and as we enter the 90s, China is starting to kind of flex some of its muscles. And one of the things that it wants is the return of previously handed over territory. So they want the return of Hong Kong, and they want the return of Macau. Now, Macau's been in Portuguese possession for hundreds of years. Hong Kong is about 150 years. But, China's not so powerful that they can just outright make these demands just yet. So they have to abide by certain rules. And the rules that they propose are known as one country, two systems. And you'll have to forgive me because it's actually one country, several systems, depending on how many places we reabsorb. But for the purposes of this, it's 2 systems. And so the promise made with Hong Kong and the promise made with Macau was we're not going to touch anything about the operation of these places for 50 years. So Hong Kong, which was a thriving democracy with a very open press and one of the major concerns was a capitalist system. Hong Kong was a financial base for East Asia as well, and Macau, not quite as thriving a democracy. Portugal themselves had only become a democracy again in the 1970s, but still, it had democratic institutions, capitalist economy, and traditions and laws of its own. These were promised to not be touched for 50 years. And at the time, there was an economic rationale for China not to touch anything. Because Hong Kong, I just look at Hong Kong. In 1997, when the handover happened, the economy, it's called GDP, the economy was 177 billion US dollars in size. So 177 billion, okay? At the time, all of China in 1997 was 967 billion. So essentially, Hong Kong, one city on its own, was almost a fifth the economy of all of China. That meant that there was a lot of money in Hong Kong. And the Chinese were really incentivized to leave it the fuck alone. Because why throw out the golden goose? Over the course of the 1990s and into the 2000s, China's economy became more and more integrated with the world. They joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. And nowadays, Hong Kong, while still a very wealthy Chinese city, it's not the wealthiest, and it's one of, a dozen peer cities. And I don't even know where is Macau even on this list. Macau's not even on that list for top cities by GDP. And so if the Chinese fuck with Hong Kong, which they have been doing, and I'll go into that, it doesn't really matter to them. They're not throwing out the golden. They're not destroying the golden goose, because it's just one of their vastly wealthy cities. So a lot of these changes have come under the rulership of a guy named Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping has been in power since 2012. Yeah, 2012. And Xi is less like Deng Xiaoping and more like Mao Zedong. Xi doesn't ever want to leave office. Xi wants to be the Winnie the Pooh in charge of everything. Xi is a fan of Cult of Personality and really, really doesn't like it when minorities or Democrats speak up and get uppity. And so he has presided over what was called the Belt and Road Initiative, which was a massive amount of spending that China did to essentially, the nice way of it is to improve the economies of struggling countries around the world. But the negative way to think about it is to buy off local governments from Europe to Africa to Asia to North America, and make them more dependent on Chinese everything. He presided over the restriction of rights that precipitated the 2014 Hong Kong protests. This was because of an attempted change to reform Hong Kong's electoral system and put more CCP, more Communist Party representatives on in Hong Kong's politics by default. There was a further protest in 2019 and 2020 after more, even tighter restrictions were placed. Hong Kong doesn't really have a functioning democracy anymore. Hong Kong doesn't have a functioning free press anymore. China promised 50 years, and we barely got 20. Macau, I think, is in a similar boat, but they didn't have as strong a tradition of speaking out in protest that Hong Kong did. And all of this has strong implications for Taiwan, because China, again, has the opinion that Taiwan is a rebellious province. And Taiwan now has a thriving democracy. And if they are absorbed back into China, the PRC is just not going to let that. That's just not going to be allowed to happen. Also, work camps and genocide of the Uyghurs in northwestern China because they're Muslim, and obviously all Muslims are terrorists. This is really straight out of an authoritarian playbook where you just can't stand people doing things differently. I'm not going to say that all Uyghurs are salt of the earth, the best people on the planet. I'm sure that there's some really bad people in there, but you do not do cultural re-education camps for all the men in your village because of two bad guys. That's a bad look, as they say. And cross-strait relations with Taiwan have taken an absolute nosedive since Xi Jinping has been in power. And he's actually tasked the military with coming up with a Taiwanese invasion plan to be enacted as early as 2030. So, we have that to look forward to in the future. That is where my notes end for all of these centuries of Chinese history. Oh God, I've gone blurry again. A new camera.
Yes.
I am going to. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to turn off my camera. There. But I can keep talking here. So that's all I had prepared. But if anybody has any questions, if I didn't cover something you wanted to hear about, please speak up now. I will do my best to bring it up. Otherwise, I hope people enjoyed that. That's what I got.
Yeah, it was great. Same. I did not expect to get so much out of it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there's no further conversation to be had, I'm going to stop the recording. That doesn't mean people have to take off, but it does mean that I no longer have to be on the clock, as it were. So I will stop this.